We're in the nervous system 5, spinal cord. The function of the spinal cord is reflex, and the neurocircuitry in the spinal cord is pretty simple and straightforward. Like this one, you have a sensory input, send the sensory information in, and you have a motor output, send the motor information out. And sometimes you have the interneuron in between, and that's pretty much it. So you have the ascending part, you have the integrating part, and the descending part, send it out. So I will leave this video to you. Your spinal cord, that's the organization of spinal cord. You have the cervical part, thoracic, and the lumbar. The conus medullaris, that's part in your spinal cord. When they reach here and they start to branch out, the coda equina, that means the ponytail. So that's the place after that the spinal nerves branch out, and they stay in the inside the vertebral foramen. That's your vertebrae column. The spinal nerves, you have 7 cervical vertebrae and 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and the spinal nerves they extend out between the vertebra and vertebra, so they have 1 more. So they totally have 8 cervical nerves, and all the other are the same: 12 spinal and 5 lumbar part and 5 sacral. And they have those enlargement structure called in the cervical part, lumbar part, and the ponytail called coda equina. And this is your spinal cord structure. So in the posterior part, you have the dorsal median sulcus. In the anterior part, and also called the ventral part, you have the ventral median fissure. Now let's look at the gray area. So the inside is gray. You have 3 horns: the dorsal horns, the ventral horns, and the lateral horn. And the opening in the center is called the central canal. And you have CSF. And now let's look at this part. So this part, that's called the dorsal root, and this is the ventral root. That's where the nerve extends out, those axons extending out. And we'll talk more about it. Functionally, the dorsal part is the sensory input, and the ventral root, that's the motor output. And now let's look at the white part. The white part is called the funiculus. Funiculus, plural. Funiculus is singular. You have the dorsal funiculus, ventral, and lateral funiculus. And these are the white parts, so they are the white matter, they are myelinated axon. So their job is to send information up to the brain and send the information down. Now let's look at their function. So the dorsal root, that's the sensory input, and will send the sensory information in to the dorsal horn. That's dorsal horn. So that's where your sensory input. And the ventral root, that's the motor output. So the motor neuron, their cell body actually stay in the ventral horn, and it will go out from the ventral root. When they combine together, that's the spinal nerve. So spinal nerve is mixed sensory and motor. And this show you those track, a bundle of axons in the central nervous system. We call them track, ascending, descending. And this slide show you those tracks can be divided into different pathways. And the descending track is more inside part. So these are the motor control. ascending tract are the sensory, they send up to the brain. Descending tract are the motor control. So you decide to control the skeletal muscle from your motor cortex. You will go to here, and from here extend out. So this side show you those motor pathway, and these are the motor pathway. Now let's look at the ramus. We talk about the dorsal root, the ventral root. The dorsal root is the sensory input. The ventral root is motor output. And when they combine together, we call them spinal nerve. After they combine together, they start to branch out. This will go to the posterior part, like your back muscle. And this will go to the ventral part, your abdominal muscle. And this part we call the dorsal ramus. This we call the ventral ramus. So rami, they are mixed motor and neuron, because after the spinal nerves they are mixed, both sensory and motor. And the ramus, they are the same. They are also mixed sensory and motor. And dermatomy is you draw the body based on their nerve, spinal nerve innervation. So they look like this. They tell you which body part is controlled by which part of your spinal nerve. And the application is, you have a patient with car accident. If they damage lumbar area, and you found, oh, okay, they paralyzed the lower body. Compare with another patient that damaged the thoracic, say T5, T6, and you found they damaged this part, they paralyzed this part. Even though they both have to sit on a wheelchair, and you are a nurse, you found, oh, okay, if a patient damaged the lumbar area in the winter, you don't have to worry about their breathing. They have too much mucus because their muscle in the thoracic part, mainly responsible for breathing, is functional. And compare with another patient damaged T5, well, in the winter you probably have to take more care or pay more attention to that patient, because this muscle, they're actually controlled by the thoracic part, and they may not have enough muscle power to cough the mucus out in the winter. So that's the application of dermatomy. And let's look at the nerve plexus. Most spinal nerves, they extend out from the spinal cord, and they organize pretty well. But in the plexi area, they start to crisscross. So they crisscross because they want to have shared function. Happens in the neck, in the arm, and also in the leg area. So you have 4 different plexi. The first one is cervical plexus. Cervical plexus is in around this area. So some of them are the cranial nerve, like cranial nerve 11 and 12, and got involved. And let's look at the brachial plexus. Brachial plexus start from C5 to T1, and these nerves, they crisscross together and become 3 important nerves: the median nerve, the radial nerve, and the ulnar nerve. These 3 nerves extend all the way down to your hand. So these 3 nerves. In the anterior part, you have 2, median nerve and ulnar nerve. So the ulnar, that's where the ulnar bone is located. Median nerve, it goes all the way through your wrist. If you have carpal tunnel syndrome, that's the median nerve. Radius, that's in the posterior part. And some patients, they cut their wrist, and what happens is they have permanent damage of the median nerve, and that's the nerve control the finger. So they have the finger like this. They call it the chicken feet finger, and they have problem for opposition movement. Now let's go to the lower limb. The lower limb part, we have 2 plexi, the lumbar and the sacral. So the lumbar plexus, they combine together and come with the big nerve called femoral nerve. Femoral nerve is go to the anterior part of your thigh. It's all from the femoral nerve. So that's the femoral nerve, very big nerve. It controls all the thigh anterior part. Now let's look at the posterior part. The posterior part comes from the sacrum plexus. So sacrum plexus, and they crisscross together and become one huge nerve called sciatic nerve. And that's the nerve hidden inside your gluteus maximus. So that's your sacrum plexus, and that's your sciatic nerve. It goes all the way down in the posterior part and go to your whole leg. Let's take a break.